Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void were prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hey guys, it's Liam. I'm here again with Rachel and Heather from the podcast Wine Time.
We're here to remind you that part 2 of last week's story is out now, wherever you get your podcasts.
We dove deep into the evidence supporting Darlie Routhier's innocence.
So if you haven't listened yet, you're missing out. Pause this episode and go check out part 2 on the Darlie Routhier case. But for those of you who are all caught up, here's your next episode of Crime Over Wine. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 13th episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week I am joined by another fellow newsie, a Southern transplant to the beautiful state of Montana. My guest co-host this week is Jed Christoff. Hello, Jed, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hey, Liam, thanks for having me on.
Jed and I met when we were both little baby interns at a TV station in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, Jed is a meteorologist at NBC Montana, where he's a dog dad and also populates his social media with incredible pictures of the sights of Big Sky Country. How's that going for you, Jed?
Oh, awesome. It's just absolutely gorgeous out here. I'm actually kind of keeping one eye on this and the other eye on the potential for an aurora tonight, if that happens. Probably try to get the northern lights in a photo or something, so you might see that in a few hours, but we'll see.
Awesome. Well, if you need to head out, I'll know why you just disappear from the podcast. Is because you need to go see some lights. I totally got that. So this week we are drinking Tribute's Sauvignon Blanc, which has bold tropical notes of citrus, grapefruit, and pineapple. The vineyard says the wine pairs well with seafood, Asian cuisine, or just like a night out on the patio. So what do you say we bust it open and get drinking?
Sounds good to me, and I have something to admit to you as well.
Okay.
I've probably only had wine about 5 times in my life. I'm not a wine drinker.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Well, hey, you know what? There's a first time or a sixth time for everything, right?
Yep, exactly.
Well, cheers to you, Jed. Thanks for coming on this week.
That's pretty good.
That is really good. I am, I have to say, I'm a red guy. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows that I'm a red guy. But if I drink a glass of white, it's usually a Sauvignon Blanc because I am also a very dry wine kind of dude. And so Sauvignon Blanc is usually my go-to. And I'm really digging this one. You definitely get the citrus flavors, but it's very, very, very subtle, very, very light.
Out of all the wines I've had, I actually really do like this one. Like, I'm not just saying that. It's pretty good.
Would you say top 5 wines that you've ever had?
Definitely. That's an easy one.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Well, let's make a short transition over to this crazy story that I'm about to tell you about, Jed. I mean, it is absolutely a roller coaster. What do you say we make that transition?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, Jed, this week I want to tell you about how an environmental crisis is exposing the horrors a major American water source has been unknowingly concealing for decades. Severe drought in the West has given some families the answers they've waited for decades. But for one family, it only gave them more questions. Today, I want to tell you the story of Bobbi Eugene Shaw and the bodies in Lake Mead. So in order to understand the story I'm going to tell you about today, you first need to understand the monstrous water crisis going on in the Western United States, quite literally as we speak. And nothing demonstrates that crisis quite as much as the conditions of the country's largest source of water and power, Lake Mead. The Lake Mead area received about 7 million visitors in 2021 and is a water source to about 25 million people in Arizona, Nevada, California, and Mexico. The lake, along with Lake Powell, fowl feeds into the Colorado River. But over the past 2 decades, as severe drought has gripped the region, these critical sources of water have dried out significantly. It's being caused by a dry spell in the Colorado River basin, over-extraction, extreme heat, and also decreased snowmelt. From May to October of 2022, levels at the bodies of water have fallen to historic lows. Last year, the lakes were about 26% full, the highest level since it was first filled in 1937. To put that into context, in 1983, the lake's height was about 1,225 feet. In the summer of 2022, those levels dropped to 1,040 feet, a drop of nearly 200 feet. Now, that might not sound like a lot of water, but let me put that all into context for you. That translates to about 67 yards down, about two-thirds of a football field. And that equals 5.5 trillion gallons of water. And Jed, there are some aerial shots of the progression of this drought that I'm going to send to you right now. And we're also going to link to these pictures on our website too.
Wow. That is just incredible. That is.
Yeah. I mean, I just look at like even because like the top. So just to describe for listeners, like it shows like a pretty slim lake. I don't know how wide across it goes. Actually, it looks like maybe about 2 to 4 kilometers based on like the little reference point down there. But you know, it shows like what looks like a river on top, like northern part of the of this lake flowing into the southern part of this body of water, which looks like more of a lake area. And, you know, over the last 20 years or so, it's dried out. I mean, you can't see any water based on the aerial photo from 2022.
That's crazy. Even in just that 1 year's time, that is a significant difference.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, so it's looking at 3 different pictures. So the all the way to the left is 2000, the middle is 2021, the right is 2022. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, 2021 to 2022. I mean, I literally, if I didn't look at the picture or the year, I probably would have guesstimated it probably would be, you know, about 10 years out. Ish. I mean. It's crazy how much
it's bad.
It looks like it's just, so bad. So it's rough. And I think it just shows, even like the surrounding areas too, you can even see how it's just, there's no water being populated to that land outside of that.
And being so close to such a huge city, that's a main source of drinking water. And then you got the farmers. That's a big concern.
Yeah. So the drought is so bad in the West right now. About 2/3 of the entire state of New Mexico is under a drought warning of different levels of severity, leading to efforts to limit water use in an attempt to preserve the water still in the lakes, rivers, and tributaries. But luckily for us, we have a meteorologist here to explain all of this. So, Jed, why is this happening out west? And just how bad is it? And how bad could it get if things continue this way?
Well, sure. Yeah, it's bad. There's a lot of different things that go into it. A couple of them, number one being population growth. I mean, as people move out there and they use the water and they overuse it, that's a problem. Humans using too much, especially for agriculture. And then also, of course, climate change, higher temperatures, low precipitation, climate change. You've got more extreme events that last longer. So more extreme droughts that are lasting longer, which is exactly what has been going on here. Of course, just due to the increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and people burning fossil fuels and deforestation and everything. So obviously not a good situation. And if it continues to go on, that's going to lead to some long-term big issues there. You may not even have water in Lake Mead in another 10 years if things were to go at the rate that they're going right now.
Yeah. So I'm looking at, when you said that, I was wondering, I was like, okay, how many people have actually moved to this area, in this period of time? So I'm looking at some data right now, and it looks like, going back to 2000, just about 1 million people, more people live there now. So, it's just crazy how, you think about the supply demand aspect to all of this, more people there, the water has to come from somewhere. And
No
if
kidding.
if it's not being contributed to, in the same rate as it's being consumed, that spells trouble, right?
Absolutely. There's a little bit of good news, I do have to say. Utah has been getting slammed with snow lately, so the snowpack's actually doing really great out there. That's going to help a little bit as that flows into the Colorado River and eventually Lake Mead. But, I mean, that's still just a tiny dent in what has already just been a very impressive drop in water level there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, and the drops in water level was becoming so dangerous around this time, and it still is. Federal officials say it could take years to replenish the West's water resources. In 2022, the levels dropped about 32 more feet. Environmental experts said if the levels drop that much this year, power generation would become a significant concern because that would leave some tubes exposed, meaning they couldn't pick up any more water to power resources. It's become such an acknowledged crisis that states that benefit from the lake's water supply are actively trying to slow down its depletion. In 2022, the states of Nevada, Arizona, and California reached a $200 million deal along with the federal government to keep water in Lake Mead and the Colorado River Basin. The Las Vegas Sun reported that the agreement consisted of a voluntary reduction plan for users. It's hoping to preserve an additional 500,000 acre feet of water, but in 2023, we're really just waiting to see their effect that may have on the West's largest water source.
Hopefully it helps a little bit. And again, we did get a good bit of precipitation out there this year, so that's good at least. But
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Is there any trend to suggest that maybe, was this just a really good winter kind of thing? Or is this possibly, picking back up in a better direction? Or is it just are you not able to tell?
Yeah, too early to tell, but I would assume it's been just a really good winter, especially for California. They've been seeing an extreme amount of mountain snowfall, and actually some of the mountains outside of LA were under a blizzard warning not long ago, and that's pretty unheard of. So I think it's just been a very significant winter, and you can't really expect that to continue to happen year in and year out.
Yeah, and I think fair to say, I guess, that it really is going to take people, doing their part to try to, at the very least slow this down, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely agriculturally wise as well, not using as much water.
Well, so the environmental crisis had already exposed so much. The sinking water levels exposed a World War II era boat that was apparently used to transport troops to Normandy, and a water intake valve from 1971 that can no longer draw water. But that's not all that this crisis was revealing. What is going to surface are decades of secrets that would bring comfort to some, but also alarm so many more.
Here we go.
Before the water levels had dropped, Lake Mead already had a dangerous reputation. It was known as one of America's deadliest parks. Dating back to the 1930s, the National Park Service says 300 people had drowned in the lake, most of whom had been recovered. But from 2013 to 2022 alone, the owner of a private business that specializes in this kind of work reported pulling 10 to 12 bodies from the lake.
Is that his job? He goes out there and like what?
I think so. I don't think, no, so just to be clear. So he's not just looking around for bodies. I think, but I think he owns some sort of private, diving business.
Oh.
So maybe he looks for
Oh
all sorts of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And so maybe evidently bodies is maybe a part of that, but not necessarily the entire, it's not hire me, we'll find your bodies kind of thing.
My gosh, imagine going out just scuba diving and encountering something like that. That'd be terrible.
Oh man, yeah, seriously. Of course, not everyone who had died in Lake Mead was recovered. Families had reported that they knew their loved one had likely drowned in the lake, but their bodies were never found. But what about people whose loved ones had no idea that this may have been their final resting place? On May 1st of 2022, boaters were returning to the docks after a day out on the lake when they heard a scream from the beach. They got back to the shore, tied up, and ran to the source of this commotion. There, they saw a 50-gallon corroded metal barrel stuck in the mud near the popular boat ramp. Inside, they could see clothing, a shirt, and a belt. and then, upon closer examination, what appeared to be human remains.
Ooh, yeah, no way that could be a drowning.
No, right? Yeah, in a barrel. I mean, unless you like, I do picture, like, when I first saw this, I pictured that woman who went over Niagara Falls in a barrel. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do picture that, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's like just like a weird experiment gone wrong. But that, spoiler alert, like, not the case here.
Did they find out the cause of death?
So the body is in advanced stages of decomposition, and easy to believe because they think this man had died between the mid 1970s and the early 1980s based on the clothing he was wearing. Now, in normal circumstances, it would be nearly impossible for a medical examiner to determine a cause or manner of death on a body being underwater for quite literally decades. But in this case, they're able to do that. That's because it's very obvious there is a clear as day gunshot wound directly to the head. Ooh. A local expert says it had, quote, all the makings of a gangland hit.
Wow. So someone definitely murdered this guy and just dropped him into the lake, hoping that the lake, would stay at the level it was at.
Right.
And then here we have this drought affecting the lake. And 40 years later, here we go. That makes me think, how many bodies could be in the lakes that I visited here in Montana?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. When I started reading this, I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm not a huge lake person to begin with. But I definitely was like, yeah, I'm never going in a lake ever again after this one. Mm-mm.
And I know they clean up the water and everything, but like all the folks drinking that water, just think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. My mind didn't go there. Now my mind is definitely going there. Yeah, that's really gross. Really gross. Well, police start creating this narrative of how this man may have spent his final moments nearly 50 years ago. They said he was likely shot in the head execution style and crammed into the drum before it was dropped into the lake. Police said it was very clearly a homicide. A local mob museum said this was historically a mob method of disposing bodies, and coincidentally, around the time investigators had estimated this man likely died, the mob had a stranglehold on the city of Los Angeles, which was just about a 30-minute drive from Lake Mead. They said the mafia would use casinos and resorts for the purpose of laundering money, and specifically would pressure non-union businesses in the area to sign on using scare tactics as an effort to get them to pay up in exchange for protection.
So bottom line, don't get involved with mafia.
Yeah. I was like really picturing like every single stereotypical mob movie I've ever seen. Like when I was reading this, I was like, yeah, this feels right.
What about the scene of the crime? Did they find anything else?
Well, so not far from the barrel, a second barrel is apparently found, but this one had no human remains inside, so it's not totally clear if they're like directly connected. Investigators believe that when these barrels were put into the lake, they were likely submerged about 100 feet underwater and a few hundred yards from shore. But as levels in the lake dropped, the barrels became exposed. A while later, a journalist called into police because they had found a gun near where the barrels were found, as reported by NBC News. But police say it's not clear if the guns were connected to the body, adding that guns were like constantly popping up along the beach, which like...
Totally normal?
Okay, like feels like a weird thing. Like I've been to the beach many times. I know you're a huge beach guy yourself. Like I've never once found a gun, and I've never even heard of like a gun popping up on the beach, on any beach before. Like, have you ever found a gun?
No, definitely. Well, actually, I haven't found a gun, but this is actually a complete side topic. But there was one time a Civil War ordinance, I think I'm saying that right, essentially like an old Civil War explosive like washed up on Folly, and they had to, on Folly Beach, South Carolina, and they had to like section that entire area off on the beach so they could go like dispose of it.
And that makes sense. Like that's like a very like reasonable thing, you know, like there are warships all the time, like, you know, decades, years later, like that washes up after one time. Like for police to just be like, yeah, like that happens all the time. Like, okay, like maybe we should be like looking into this a little bit more.
Seems a little fishy.
Yeah, it definitely seems a little fishy, especially when like you're having a lot of bodies pop
Yeah.
up, and like, especially like, I don't know about that. It gives me weird feelings. So the medical examiner's office tried to find any identifying features on the body, which was apparently very difficult because of the advanced stages of decomposition the body was in at this point. The ME didn't find any identifying features, just the clothes that the man was wearing. The medical examiner performed a number of tests, including, of course, an autopsy and a toxicology, but as far as I can tell, those reports still haven't been completed, or the more likely answer is that they didn't contain anything significant because of the length of time that we're talking about since the man had been killed. The man had become known as the Hemingway Harbor Doe, named after the location where he was found. And the reason that specific identification was necessary is because he was about to be just the first set of human remains that would end up being pulled from Lake Mead.
Well, it sounds like I'm going to need another glass of wine then.
Oh, we're like only halfway through, Jed. Like, we're
gosh.
not even there yet. So yeah, so you're like, definitely take a second, fill up the glass, because I mean, I'm really enjoying this one. It's, I think about like halfway through my first glass.
Oh, sweet.
And very citrusy, like very, very citrusy.
I noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, it's just so crazy how you notice the flavors once you become aware of them. Really take a second to like think about like what you're drinking and read the label.
Absolutely.
Like, that is one of the things that I've learned, you know, when doing this. And you know, someone told me once, they were like, if you're going to drink the wine, like you need to know the wine. And I think that's really important to you know, understand, so that way you're not just like tossing them back, like you're actually like appreciating it.
I'm glad you did not choose a red wine, because I have had red wine before and I just couldn't even drink it. But this is really good. So
we'll get you there, Jed.
Yeah.
We'll get you there.
I'm more of a beer drinker.
Okay, fair. I got that from you. I definitely got that from you. All right, so what do you say we transition back? There are about a half dozen more bodies that we need to talk about here.
Let's do it.
So just 6 days after those barrels were found, a pair of sisters were out paddleboarding on Colville Bay on the complete other side of the lake as Hemingway Harbor. The sisters came across a set of partial human remains in the sand, and it's not clear what exactly the human remains were. I saw some reports that said it was just a jawbone, while others were more ambiguous about the remains. But police did say that the remains were more skeletal than the original body that was discovered on May 1st, which still apparently had skin tissue attached. There was apparently enough of the remains for the medical examiner's office to give an age estimate. The ME estimates that this person was likely between the ages of 23 to 37 when they died. And while they're trying to identify who that set of remains belonged to, even more remains start popping up. 3 more sets of remains are found in the water and on the shore of Lake Mead between July 25th and August 15th. And then 2 months later, the 6th, and as of the recording of this episode, the most recent discovery of human remains. The remains are all skeletal, and they're all described as bones, which kind of tells me that they're like pieces of skeletons, like individual bones, not necessarily entire sets of human remains. And so the medical examiner's office says that it's possible that they all belong to one person, but they don't rule out the possibility that they all belong to separate people. And I believe that they're still running tests to figure that out.
I mean, that's got to be extremely challenging to figure out who they belong to. They've been sitting in water for, I mean, decades.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, just from like, again, like, we're talking about like individual bones, like, from what I can tell, like, you know, again, this one report that I saw said that it was just a jawbone. Like, how the heck do you determine how someone died from just a jawbone?
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, that's just insane.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how you could ever figure out how they possibly passed away if all you have are just the bones.
Yeah, well, so they really can't, like, not definitively, of course, but in that original set's case, there was very clear head trauma, of course. So that's not so much the case, though, with the rest of the sets. There are no obvious injuries that would point to even an assumption of a cause of death, but they could estimate that some of the bodies were underwater for decades. So the running theory here from police is that most of the victims died from drowning.
You know, that makes sense. I'm sure that there's quite a few victims that did die from drowning, but how could you ever know? Like,
No, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, and with it being that close to Las Vegas too, you know, someone could easily just drive there. It's the first available big area of water.
Right. And totally. And I think, you know, I mentioned at the top, like 7 million people are there, you know, every year-ish. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it it has happened every once in a while. I did mention that statistic up at the top of the episode that said like 300 people-ish are estimated to have drowned. I think they said most of which have been recovered. But I'm also thinking, I'm like, okay, like how, like just, this is just my paranoid brain because, like, full disclosure, drowning is like one of my biggest fears. Like, I cannot go that way. You know what I mean? And so I like just thinking to myself, like, okay, like if I'm out, like how do you drown and you're just never found?
Yeah.
Like where are what are these families thinking?
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying to think about. I'm sure a lot of the times too, it's like a boating accident at night, the worst possible scenario.
Yeah. Well, so like, did you like read ahead? Because like we're about to get to that exact point. Well, all the while, police are trying to identify the victims whose bodies were being revealed by the worst of this worsening environmental catastrophe. And eventually they get a hit. 3 months after the remains were discovered on May 7th, police are finally able to give closure to one family. Through DNA, they positively identify that second set of remains as 42-year-old Thomas Ernst of San Francisco, California. Thomas disappeared in the water on August 2nd, 2002, when he took his family out for, like Jed, like the future predictor here, midnight cruise on the lake. The family had a tradition of taking their boat out to the lake on Saturdays to camp, and they would often go riding at night. Well, Thomas jumped into the water, but started drowning. The family tried to help, but couldn't. When they called police, helicopters and first responders couldn't find him either. And so, for 20 years, Thomas's family classified him as a missing person until they finally got the call to submit DNA samples to determine if they had finally found him after all of these years.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing to think about.
Well, and it's also, so like the missing person part is like a little strange, I guess. I don't know. It's like, imagine being like, a wife or, your son or a child or, what have you. And, thinking about like for 20 years, like, that your father's or your loved ones, your remains are down there, but you can't really, like, I feel like that has to open up a whole new set of wounds, because it's like, I'm sure they had a funeral and all that stuff, but like, the casket is empty, because where they are. And so that makes me kind of sad.
Yeah, that is terrible. What about all the other remains that you were talking about? Did they ever find out who they were?
So not definitively, but on one set, they're about to get a pretty good idea, one that could open a whole different can of worms. Out of the blue, the lead investigator on the case gets a call from a woman named Barbara Brock, who says she believes the unidentified remains found in that barrel in May is her brother.
Okay, that's a little bit strange, like almost like a red flag. Like, hey, like, by the way, I think that might be my brother.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, because like I've done so many, like, I'm sure, like my like niche reporting is like crime stories. And so whenever I do any kind of like story, even slightly, tied to something like this, I always get somebody who says, hey, I know all the tea or whatever. And they never do, it's like, classic. So it's like, so it's like, they're like, people will do anything to get involved in a story. And so I'm sure like investigators are like, a little bit of a red flag. So the woman tells KVVU, the Fox affiliate in Las Vegas, that her brother was Robert Eugene Shaw and that she hasn't seen him since 1977. Police initially say that the man matches Barbara's description based on the clothes that he was wearing and the limited identifying features that they're able to figure out about him, like his height and general build. But Barbara's story also matches pretty well with what they initially estimated. Barbara says that she last saw Bobbi in Fontana, California on May 14th, 1977, the same time frame police believe that this man may have died. Barbara says that the last time she saw him, he was going to Las Vegas with an unidentified friend, and she tells KVVU that she gave up on him being alive a long time ago. She also tells the television station something interesting, that her brother was a known member of the mafia.
Well, there you go. It goes back to my point earlier. Don't get involved with the mafia.
Yeah. I think that's a very good, life rule in general.
Let's just not do it.
Right. Yeah. I think, from episode 1, I think we all learned, like, do not get involved in cults. Like, okay, cool. Episode 4, like, do not get involved in, weird church situations.
Yes.
Do not get involved with the mafia. I think those are very good life
There we
rules.
go. I thought it was kind of funny how she was just like, oh, side note, by the way, he was a known member of the mafia.
Yeah, like very like weird flex. Very, very
Yep.
weird flex. Very, very weird flex. So this was, as I mentioned, a time when the mafia is basically running Las Vegas. And in 1976, a Las Vegas newspaper reported that Shaw was arrested during a protest on the Strip against the culinary union. And this is when some point to a notorious culinary union boss named Al Bramlett. Now, there is a lot to dig through on Al. I went through like a massive click hole, but I'll leave all that information to some mafia podcast to comb through. But basically, Al died in 1977 too in a desert outside of Las Vegas after he reportedly refused to pay a hitman for a series of bombings on non-union restaurants.
Okay, wow. He kind of brought that onto himself there. Like, I hate to say that, but if you're involved in illegal stuff and you're working with people that are doing illegal things, maybe pay them.
I'm also picturing like every single episode of The Sopranos through this. Like, this literally just reminds me of... Yeah, like this is exactly what I'm picturing, like the 1970 version of Sopranos. So police give Barbara a DNA test to try to match her sample up with this still unidentified doe. But that's pretty much where things stand with that. As far as I can tell, those results are still not back yet. So that family has not gotten the definitive answers they've been waiting for almost 50 years. But their identity is just one piece of the puzzle here. Another piece of the puzzle is who is responsible for killing him. Regardless of who the man is, there's no disputing that he is a homicide victim, and I'm confident someone out there knows something after all of these years. So if you know anything about this case or any other missing persons case that has even the slightest connection to Lake Mead or the Las Vegas area, call the Las Vegas Police Department, and that number is 702-828-3111, and we are also going to put that number on our website too.
How cool would it be if we solved this crime?
That would be really cool. Hey, you know what? If I keep going, that's one of the reasons why I did this, is just because I wanted to put these kind of cases out there that no one's really talking about.
Yeah.
And, it would be neat if somebody out there, this catches the right person and, it got to the right people who, saw that one thing. Remember that one thing back in 1977 that just didn't feel right.
I mean, you never know. And there's always the chance. So
there sure is. Well, in 2023, that's pretty much where things stand, but probably not for long. That's because people pretty much universally agree that there are more bodies to be discovered at the bottom of Lake Mead. And with the current environmental crisis there, they say it's only a matter of time before they surface too. Steve Schaefer, who owns Earth Resource Group, an environmental consulting firm, says that these 6 sets of remains are likely just the beginning. He told Newsweek that he predicts hundreds of bodies will be pulled from the bottom of the lake every time the water levels drop more and more and more. That's because there are hundreds of legitimate drowning victims who still haven't been found years later. But the question is, how many of those bodies are victims of tragic accidents, and how many could be victims of foul play, just like Bobbi? The environmental crisis that is depleting the levels at Lake Mead have this significantly positive side effect. At least 2 families who have found closure or are at least close to it. But it doesn't take away from the true nature of this disaster, and that's that drought that is crippling the western United States. And you can help stop it too. Pretty universally, experts agree that if something doesn't change in 2023, Lake Mead is just a lost cause, but that means it's not too late. We are going to put a range of resources on our website and in our show notes, not only in how you can voice your support for saving Lake Mead, but also how you can do your part to slow the depletion and ultimately save the Earth.
I think we're going to have to come back in a couple of years and revisit this. Did they find more bodies in that amount of time? Did Lake Mead actually start to gain more water, or did it continue downhill?
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, frankly, like if it's going the way that it's going to, like eventually it's going to dry out altogether. So like at some point, like all those
does not look
secrets,
good.
yeah. So it's, at some point it's going to be pretty clear as day, what's at the bottom of the lake. Yeah. So, it's just kind of, I mean, and it's almost like I'm almost wondering, like, are they just going to start like searching it? Like, literally just dragging the bottom of it? Cause at some point you just have to think like, I don't know. And is it even worth it? I mean, I guess if it's been so long, like, I mean, it's probably just better to wait, I guess, which almost seems kind of horrible, but it might be.
I got on this random YouTube binge one day, and there's this guy, I think he's somewhere out in Florida. He owns a boat and some sort of, I don't really know exactly what it was. It was probably sonar or something, but he's scanning the bottom of lakes and stuff to see if he can uncover stuff. So maybe they just need to go out there and do that. And obviously there's less of the lake to actually need to patrol,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, you can, it sounds like you could do this every year and you'll probably find more and more and more. So it's just, I mean, that's crazy. And, and it sounds like, I don't know what this guy that this like diver dude is doing, like what his like main purpose is, but it sounds like maybe there are even people out there already doing that, and, are just waiting for it. Like, I don't know. It's crazy to me, I guess, that it just is a waiting game, I suppose, for, these drowning victims to disappear and like, and, maybe, some, an occasional homicide or two, I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, it just blows my mind. And I mean, I just can't imagine that, like, just again, I'm a crime freak. And so it's like, thinking about, this guy whoever did this to potentially Bobbi, clearly didn't go far enough, to conceal it, and so I'm wondering like how many people did go far enough, like went far enough to make sure this person was never found, and it's just sitting at the bottom of the lake waiting to be discovered.
On one hand, I'm like, I almost want it to dry up so we can find out, I'm really curious. But on the other hand, that's so bad. Like, we can't have that happen.
Oh, I am so right there with you, Jed. I am having a serious moral crisis here. The crime lover in me wants like more episodes. And so I really like need to know who else is at the bottom of the lake. But then like the moral, like environmental, save the earth side of me is like, okay, like, no, we actually need to put more water back in that lake, like,
Exactly.
Well, that is all that we have for you this week, Jed. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us this week and talking about everything to do with the environment and weird bodies being discovered.
Thanks for having me on. This has been awesome. Seriously, really enjoyed it.
Well, I'll have to have you on again. But in the meantime, tell everyone where they can find you and also your work online.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. I pretty much just use Twitter mainly. I use Instagram a little bit too, but Twitter is @Jed MBCMT. And Instagram is @JedChristophPhoto.
I hope we haven't held you up too much to see those lights. But if you want to go see some of that, like that, where to find Jed now.
It's on there. It's on there.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you again so much for coming on, and thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and we will see you next week for another episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.